Okay, sorry about that. So I hope that made sense about the short tandem repeats, which are these areas of non-coding DNA found along the chromosome and which are used in solving crime, so in forensic science. So they're used to build up a genetic fingerprint, and we've seen how you can compare different samples taken from suspects with an original sample taken from the victim at the crime scene. So hopefully that made sense. And now we'll move on to talking about DNA replication a little bit more. Okay, so I still have my camera buddy here, so I'm trying not to switch it off this time. So, as we said, it's very important that DNA replicates itself. It has to do that before your cells can divide, otherwise each cell won't have an exact copy of DNA. It's very important that each cell has the same DNA so that it can make the same proteins and keep on making more and more of the same proteins. So if this doesn't happen, then tumours might develop. So in the case of sunburn, if people get sunburns, that can cause the DNA in your cells to actually mutate. And if it's mutated and your cells carry on dividing, then you'll end up with a tumour because the cell is not the same as the original cell because of the mutation. So it can cause tumours, and it can cause genetic disorders and abnormalities in offspring as well. So it's very important that the DNA replicates itself exactly every time your cells divide. And remember, the cell division that you looked at in grade 10 was called mitosis, and that was where your somatic cells, your body cells, divide to produce two daughter cells which are identical to each other and also identical to the parent cell. So that's mitosis, and we will go over that very briefly before we start talking about meiosis. So every time this happens, your DNA needs to be replicated exactly. And this takes place during part of the cell cycle called interphase. You'll need to remember that for the exam as well. So the part of the cell cycle called interphase is where the DNA is replicated. And this is where another important nucleic acid comes in as well, which I mentioned last time, called Rna, Ribose nucleic acid. We cannot copy the DNA unless RNA is present. RNA needs to be there to copy sections of the DNA template. And this is also important for protein synthesis, which we just covered again, and we'll cover in more detail in a bit. So in order for proteins to actually be synthesized from our DNA, which make up our genes, we need RNA to copy the DNA template. So that's what we're going to look at next. So what is RNA? RNA is ribose nucleic acid. I have another diagram, lucky you. So there are three different types of RNA. So with DNA you've only got one, but there are three types of RNA. So this is RNA, ribose nucleic acid. And we're just going to start off by comparing it to DNA, because that's the one that you know about already. So again, it's a nucleic acid, so similarities with DNA. It's a nucleic acid, it's found in the nucleus of the cell, and it's an acidic molecule, and it contains a sugar, ribose, not deoxyribose, but ribose. So looking at the differences between RNA and DNA, as you remember, the DNA molecule I showed you was double-stranded, made up of two strands twisted together. RNA is a single-stranded. It's a short molecule and it's single-stranded. It also, if you remember your nitrogenous bases from DNA, which were A, T, C and G, RNA has the base uracil instead of thymine. So instead of T, there is a U. When you look at the code from RNA that's copied from DNA, there will be a U instead of a T. And it also has a ribose sugar instead of deoxyribose, as we mentioned before, which gives a clue in the name. And it's also found inside and outside the nucleus. It's found in the nucleus because that's where it's going to copy the DNA template. And then it's found in the cytoplasm and near the ribosome as well, because it's involved in transferring that message from one place to another. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to cover this quite quickly because of our technical problems here. So basically RNA is another coding molecule like DNA,